It all started for Stanley Kubrick in late 1963, right before the release of Dr. Strangelove. This Cold War black comedy took the stuffings out of all things that America held sacred. With this one film, Stanley Kubrick rose up to the heights of his filmmaking abilities. And the Pentagon was not happy with Dr. Strangelove and his brutal portrayal of mad, murderous generals and the stumbling bumpkins running the U.S. war machine. In fact, the Pentagon turned Kubrick down when he asked for permission to shoot inside and outside of one of their B-52 bombers. One read of the script of Dr. Strangelove convinced them that this film was going to be dangerous and that Stanley Kubrick might be an agitator artist.
How long would you have to stay down there?
Well, that's,
The Pentagon saw Dr. Strangelove, and they knew they had their guy. But for what? It was at that moment that everything would change for Kubrick. If he accepted their offer, he would get anything he wanted. If he declined, they might just get rid of him. In a sense, once the offer was made, Stanley had to take it. And so Stanley Kubrick accepted a deal with the devil, so to speak. It may make you uncomfortable, but as Morpheus says in The Matrix, I didn't say it would be easy, I only said it would be the truth. So what was the deal that he made in 1963 with the military? That deal was that Stanley Kubrick would film and fake the Apollo moon landings. It has now been 40 years since the fabled moon landings by NASA and the Apollo gang. When it comes to the subject of the moon landings, people tend to fall into two belief groups. First group, by far the bigger of the two groups, accepts the fact that NASA successfully landed on the moon 6 times and that 12 human beings have actually walked on the surface of the moon. The second group, though far smaller, is more vocal about their beliefs. This group says that we never went to the moon and that the entire thing was faked. I would like to present a third position on this issue. This third point of view falls somewhere between these two assertions. This third position postulates that humans did go to the moon, but what we saw on TV and in photographs was completely faked. Furthermore, this third position reveals that Stanley Kubrick is the genius who directed the hoaxed landings. Someone in NASA or the Pentagon saw what Kubrick had done in Dr. Strangelove with the B-52s, and admiring his artfulness, designated Kubrick as the person best qualified to direct the Apollo moon landings. If he could do that well on a limited budget, what could he do on an unlimited budget? In the end, it looks like Kubrick faked the moon landings in return for two things. The first was a virtually unlimited budget to make his ultimate science fiction film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the second was that he would be able to make any film he wanted, with no oversight from anyone, for the rest of his life. Except for his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, Kubrick got what he wanted. The most pressing problem for Kubrick in 1964 was to figure out how to make the shots on the ground, on the surface of the moon, look realistic. He had to make the scenes look wide open and expansive, like it was really done on the moon, and not in some studio backlot. No one knows how many things he tried, but eventually Kubrick settled on doing the entire thing with a cinematic technique called front screen projection. It is in the use of this cinematic technique that the fingerprints of Kubrick can be seen all over the NASA Apollo photographic and video material. But what is front screen projection? Kubrick did not invent the process, but there is no doubt that he perfected it. Front screen projection is a cinematic device that allows scenes to be projected behind the actors so that it appears in the camera as if the actors are moving around on the set provided by the front screen projection. The process came into fruition when the 3M company invented a material called Scotchlite. This was a screen material that was made up of hundreds of thousands of tiny glass beads. These beads were highly reflective. In the front screen projection process, the Scotchlite screen would be placed at the back of the soundstage. The plane of the camera lens and the Scotchlite screen had to be exactly 90 degrees apart. A projector would project the scene onto the Scotchlite screen through a mirror, and the light would go through a beam splitter which would pass the light into the camera. An actor could stand in front of the Scotchlite screen and he would appear to be inside the projection. Today, Hollywood's magicians use green screens and computers for special effects, and so the front screen projection system has gone the way of the adding machine and the Model T. But for its time, especially in the 1960s, Nothing worked better than front screen projection for that realistic look that would be needed both for the 8-man scenes in 2001: A Space Odyssey and the faked Apollo moon landings. One has to remember that the early scenes in 2001 with the actors in ape costumes were all done on a sound stage. None of what you were seeing in the 8-man scenes at the beginning of 2001 was actually shot outside. One of the ways that you can tell the front screen system is being used is that the bottom horizon line between the actual set and the background Scotchlight screen has to be blocked. Kubrick strategically located rocks and other things near the bottom of the scene in order to hide the projection screen. In other words, the camera and the viewers would see the bottom of the background projection screen if it were not blocked in some fashion. As part of the trick, it becomes necessary to place things in between the screen and the set to hide the bottom of the screen. I have photoshopped a line differentiating the set and the background Scotchlight front projection screen. Please note how everything is in focus, from the pebbles on the ground in the set to the desert mountains beyond. You will see that hiding the bottom of the Scotchlight screen is always being done when the front screen projection system is being used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Hiding the screen is one of the fingerprints. It is evidence of its use. As you will see before this film is finished, this same fingerprint, this same evidence is clearly seen in all of the NASA Apollo stills and video images. It is this fingerprint that reveals not only that NASA faked the Apollo missions, but how they faked them. Let's examine a few NASA Apollo images now. This is a still from Apollo 17. This is also a great example of the front screen projection process. Again, I have photoshopped a line indicating the back of the set. One can see that there is a slight uprising behind the rover, which is hiding the bottom of the screen. Also notice that even though everything is in focus, from the lunar rover to the mountains in the background, there is a strange change in the landscape of the ground right behind my lines. This is because the photo of the mountains being used on the front projection system has a slightly different ground texture than the set. As we go on, we will see that this fingerprint is also consistent throughout the Apollo images. Here's another Apollo image. Now here is my version where I show the line between the set and the screen. Again, notice the texture of the ground changes right behind my line. Now let's go to some more Apollo images. We can see that the same thing occurs here as in the 8-man scenes in 2001. There is always a line separating the set from the screen. Even if you do not see it at first, it will become apparent as one grows more familiar with the front screen projection process and how it is being used to fake the astronauts standing on the lunar surface. Go to any NASA site like www.apolloarchive.com and start looking for yourself. Not all lunar surface shots are using the process. Sometimes the astronauts are just standing on the set with a completely and suspicious black background. The early missions, Apollo 11 and 12, used the front screen projection system only when they had to. But as the missions went on and they had to look better, Kubrick began to perfect the process. Although you can see the front screen projection process on every mission, the seriously revealing images are in the later missions, particularly Apollo 14, 15, 16, and, my favorite, 17. Here are a few from Apollo 17. The astronaut is driving the lunar rover parallel to the screen, and the rover is only 3 or 4 feet away from the Scotchlight. Please note how the tire treads just lead to nowhere. Actually, they are going to the edge of the set. In this one, the astronaut is about 6 feet in front of the Scotchlight screen. Please note how everything is in focus, from the rocks and pebbles close to the camera all the way to the crystal clear mountain behind the astronaut. As we shall see, even that is impossible. Also, please note the other telltale evidence that permeates the Apollo images. There is a stark difference in the ground texture between the set and what is being projected onto the screen. You can almost count the number of small rocks, and the granularity of the ground is clearly seen on the set. But once we get to the screen on the other side of my line, this granularity disappears. This next image is a slick little piece of work. When first viewed, one is sure that they are looking across the vast, unbroken lunar surface from beginning to end. With the Earth rising, it is truly a stunning shot. But sure enough, close examination reveals the set screen line once again. Again, please note the change in the texture of the ground immediately on each side of the line. The little pebbles and dust just seem to disappear behind my line. But there's more. One of the many things that many researchers have discovered about the Apollo footage is that if you slightly speed up the footage of the astronauts walking around on the lunar surface, they appear to be doing their business in normal speed, like they are on Earth. It is apparent that the footage has been shot in slow motion to give the effect of a low-gravity situation. It seems odd that one would move slower in a low-gravity environment because the low gravity would cause even less resistance, not more. In the scenes in 2001, near the beginning, we see the people on the ship and on the lunar surface also moving in a slightly slow-motion manner. Again, this doesn't make a lot of sense in a real-life situation. If anything, they should be moving faster than on Earth because there's less gravity. But showing astronauts moving normally really causes the action to look unreal and staged. So Kubrick decided to shoot the moon scenes both in 2001 and in the Apollo landings in slow motion to make it more convincing. In a way, we were being set up by the film 2001 to accept the odd slow motion in the Apollo scenes. This may have been one of the reasons to release 2001 a year before the Apollo 11 landing. By creating a slow motion environment in 2001, the audience would then accept the slow motion environment being portrayed in the Apollo footage.
There is one thing that I'm sure of. Some part of Stanley Kubrick wanted everyone to know what he had done, and that is why he left behind clues that would explain who did it and how. Film Wag the Dog, Dustin Hoffman plays a movie producer hired by the CIA to fake an event. His name in the movie is Stanley. In that movie, Stanley mysteriously dies after telling everyone that he wants to take credit for the event that he helped to fake. Stanley Kubrick died 4 days after showing Eyes Wide Shut to the executives at Warner Brothers. It is rumored that they were very upset concerning the film. They wanted Kubrick to re-edit the film, but he refused. I personally was in France when Kubrick died and saw on French television outtakes from several scenes that were never in the finished film. And finally, Eyes Wide Shut was released on July 16, 1999. Stanley Kubrick insisted in his contract that this be the date of the release. July 16, 1999 is exactly 30 years to the day that Apollo 11 was launched.
Under the Masonic moon, plans were made by the bankers in the back room. Get the president out of the way and hire Stanley Kubrick. Under the Masonic moon.